Well, again, I spoke last week on Genesis 37, 1 through 24, from the pit to prison to paradise. And I just felt kind of empty on last week after the Lord finished working on last week. And again, you know, I knew something was missing. And I got to come back to help those that was here last week to come up out this pit. Come on, somebody. I got to help somebody come up out the pit. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about the pit, just a little bit, then I'm going to move on to the lesson. The story we just read is about Joseph. As I was telling the men and Pastor Manny in the back, Joseph, this story is so revelatory to my life. I can see all of my life story in the story of Joseph. I can see the pit experience, the prison experience, and the palace experience. I can see all that in my life right now. I think it's one of the most profound stories in the history of the Bible. You have to truly been brought out on the other side, Pastor Manny, to truly understand the life of Joseph. I said you have to truly have been in a pit, in prison, not physically, but in a prison, and then now living in paradise, crossed over to the other side to truly understand the story of Joseph. It's phenomenal. Because you can go so many different ways. He could have been very hard-hearted. He could have chose to live in unforgiveness the rest of his life. He could have even, when he began to rise to authority, second in command, he could have had his own flesh and blood killed for what they done for him. So you can go many different ways with the life of Joseph. Joseph was a man of character. Joseph loved to obey God more than he loved to obey his flesh. Joseph was determined to please God more than he was determined to please his flesh. Come on, somebody. Yeah. Joseph was a man of character. He was a man of integrity. He was a man of word. Because it took some word in him, Pastor, to be able to obey and do what he had to do. Because he was wrongly mistreated. And this story reminds me of the biblical truth. There are no accidents in the lives. There are no accidents in the lives of God's people. I told y'all that on last week. There are no accidents. Some of y'all sitting up in here right now, and the devil is using some of the things that you are facing right now to make you angry, frustrated, bitter, envy, jealous, and he's trying to drive you completely away from the house of the Lord as well as from God. But you don't understand that some of the things you are facing, if y'all stay with me, church, some of the things you are facing right now is because of God's divine order and because God has a mandate on your life. And so therefore, because of that mandate on his life, because you had a praying grandma, because you had a praying mother, a praying auntie, a praying father, a praying uncle, God heard their prayers. And so therefore, he's out to arrest you. He's trying to apprehend some of us this morning. Come on, somebody. The same way he apprehended Paul on the road to Damascus. God is trying to apprehend. God is trying to arrest some of y'all. The only way he's going to be able to do it, he got to put you in a tight place in order to get your attention. So quit looking at your situations as, it's devil sent. Remember, it's either God sent or God used. Come on, somebody. Everything that happened to Joseph, everything that happened in Joseph's life was not an accident. It was God's plans. That's what you got to understand about the story in the life of Joseph. It was God's plan. It wasn't an accident. Some of the things you're going through is not an accident. It's God's plan. You cannot miss that, church. If you missed that, you didn't miss this whole sermon. God is in control of our circumstances, but we are in control of our responses. God uses circumstances to help us mature, help us to grow. He used discipleship, Pastor, to help me become long-suffering, help me learn how to be patient. Come on, somebody. You know what I'm saying? It takes major sacrifice when you're discipling men. Come on. You got to be willing to make sacrifices that other church members ain't going to make. Come on, somebody. So God will use your very circumstances to mature you. God is all about maturing. He don't want us to stay babies the rest of our life. He said go on from faith to faith to glory to glory. God is trying to use circumstances and situations to help you grow up and mature. Come on, Paul said by now you ought to be teachers, but you still need somebody to teach you. And so therefore you'll never be able to grow until you begin to submit to the pit experience. Because it's in the pit where transformation takes place. It's in the pit where your foundation is laid. It's in the pit where you learn how to study. It's in the pit where you get full of word. Come on, somebody. It's in the pit, you know what I'm trying to say, when you say, God, in God I live, in God I move. Come on. In God I have my being. It's in the pit where you truly fall in love with God. Because some of us need to be thrown in the pit, just like Joseph was, because we don't appreciate God's grace and mercy. We use God's grace and mercy as a license to sin. Some of us need to be thrown in a pit. Because it's in the pit where you learn to say, oh my God, God, I thank you for your mercy. See, that rapper that came to her, you know what I'm trying to say? He didn't have a pit experience. He didn't came to his senses like the prodigal son, and now he's using his voice and his rap music to glorify God now, because he got some revelation when he was out there in that world. He got some revelation when he got locked up in that county jail. Come on, somebody. And now he's using that revelation that God gave him in that pit experience in the county jail, you know what I'm saying, to glorify God. So you got to use your pits as an opportunity, as a stepping stone. You got to use your pits as an opportunity to fall in love with Jesus. You got to use your pits as an opportunity to be a better man, a better father, a better husband. Come on, somebody, a better disciple. But we complaining, we mad. We mad at everybody. Mad at the wife, mad at the kid, want to kill the cat and the dog. But God said, I'm using this, come on, to help you grow. You got to be careful what you're praying. The Bible said the effectual prayer of a righteous man availeth much. We are asking God for things in prayer, but then we leave up out of prayer, we forget what we ask him. And the very thing we asking God to do in our life, guess how it's going to get done? Through trials and tribulations. How do you grow in God? Through trials and tribulations. How do you become like Christ? Through trials and tribulations. How do you fall in love with the things of God? Through trials and tribulations. So the very thing that we shunning and the very thing we pushing away, God said, this is the very thing that it takes, baby. So stay right here. You're going to wander around here until you submit. You're going to stay in this wilderness experience until you submit. Yeah. The Bible says all those that desire to live godly shall suffer persecution. Just because you got a desire to live godly, you're going to suffer persecution. The Bible also says that a man must enter, come on somebody, into the kingdom of heaven through many trials and tribulation. You ain't going in if you can't go through no trials. You'll never be able to stand before God and hear job well done until you can take something. Woo, come on somebody. Yeah, we'll take a bullet for the devil, but we won't take no persecution for the Lord. I can't get nobody to say nothing right there. Yeah, but if you're going to go to heaven, you're going to go through trials and tribulations. Yeah, so quit running from your pits. Woo, I love you, God. I see how you're taking me. Quit running from your pits. Yeah, because it's the pits that God is using to make you. We'll take anything from the devil. We made no excuses. When I wanted some crack cocaine, if it wasn't a toss, I drove to OKC to get it. Come on, we don't make no excuses to smoke that dope. We don't make no excuses, you know what I'm saying? We'll drive all the way to Tulsa, you know what I'm saying, to commit adultery on our wives. Come on, somebody. But soon as Pastor Manny asks you to pick up the inmates from prison, you know what I'm saying? Oh, I got to work. Oh, I don't feel good. But you'll drive 107 miles. That's the distance, you know what I'm saying, to go get some dope. I'd to cheat. I'd to go to the casinos. I'd to be unfaithful. I'd to make excuses. That's on a Saturday night, and then you're too tired, you know what I'm saying, to get up to come to church on a Sunday morning. Taking God's grace and mercy for granted. So you need your pits. You need your pits. You got to understand in this story that Joseph was thrown in the pit behind a dream that Jehovah Jireh gave him. He wasn't thrown in the pit because he was in sin. He wasn't thrown in the pit because he was out of order. He wasn't thrown in the pit because he was being irresponsible. He was thrown in the pit, son, because of his dream, because of the calling that's on his life. When you're called and chosen and set apart, you're going to go through trials and tribulations. He's in the pit because of the calling that God put in him, in his mother's womb. That missed some of y'all. He's in the pit behind the calling that's on his life. There's some things you're going through because you're called, because you're chosen, because you're set apart. And so therefore, until you submit to that calling, guess what? You're going to stay in the pit. Oh, you may come out for a moment. You may have some good time for a moment. But guess what? You're going right back to a pit. Because it's in the pit when you get your foundation right. It's in the pit where you truly fall in love with God. It's in the pit where I fell in love with God. To make matters worse, Joseph shared his dream with his brothers and they hated him. Everybody is not going to love you, church, because you love Jesus. When I first came home from prison, my wife loved me, was in love with me, but she watched me. I'm going to help some of y'all men. She watched me. Because when I left to go to the pen, Pastor Lisa, I was irresponsible as a male. I wasn't a man. I was a male. There's a difference between a man and a male. So I was irresponsible as a male. She couldn't count on me to. One time my wife gave me some money to go buy some bread, a loaf of bread, to feed my 2 children. I took that money, ended up clean on the north side, smoking crack cocaine. She couldn't even trust me to go buy a loaf of bread, son.
Help, Lord. Help, Lord. Help, Lord.
That still bothers me to this day, Pastor Manny. My brothers, you're going to have to earn trust.